Okay, we're on the top of Pei Vav and Aleph, and we're building on a statement that Rav said in the bottom of Pei Hey and Base, which is Amarav Gagim Aliyas Loniskachu. Rav says that the rooftops and the upper chambers in the base of Mikdash did not receive kedusha. Therefore, one would not be able to eat the korbanos that had to be eaten in Makom Kadosh, for example, on top of the rooftops. We wouldn't be able to shecht, korbanos on top of the rooftops and so forth. So this is the question. Like, for example, the Korban Pesach had to be eaten in Yerushalayim, and there was some indication that you would be allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach even on the rooftops. The Gemara said, no. They only said halal on the rooftops, but they didn't actually eat the Korban Pesach on the rooftops. After they finished eating the Korban Pesach, they would go up, they would open up their doors, and they would go to the rooftops to say halal, because otherwise it was considered to be too crowded. So some say that this is the source for our minhag, that when we get past the afikomen, we open up our doors and we say shochem askar legoyim. So some say, well, we open up the doors because used to be they would bolt the doors so people wouldn't remove the korban pesach from the place they were eating. But once you finished eating the afikomen, you finished eating the korban pesach, then you would be able to go up to the roofs and open up your doors. So that's why we open up the doors at that point of the Haggadah. So now the Gemara asks, Ini. V'hatanan, is this really true that the rooftops themselves were not kadosh? We know the statement that you're not allowed after Pesach to have any dessert, but there's another interpretation of afikomen. Afikomen also has the connotation that you're not supposed to take out your kalim and say, oh, let's go and eat with another chabura. You're not allowed to say, oh, let's afiku. Let's go out and eat the chabura somewhere else. So the implication is that you're not allowed to just go, like we said previously, that they would eat the korban pesach and then afterwards they would go up to the rooftop. So we say, lo kasha kam b'shas kam shelo b'shas. Yeah, they weren't allowed to go from chabura to chabura while they were eating the korban pesach. That's true. But what did we say previously? We just said that they went up to the rooftop to say halal. That was to answer up Rav, to indicate that they weren't eating the korban pesach on the rooftops because it wasn't kadosh. But it doesn't mean that they couldn't leave from their chabura when they had finished eating the korban pesach. So that was really the kasha. The kasha was, how can you say that they had a right to leave? So the answer is, yeah, they did have a right to leave when they stopped eating. So Tashma, so now we have the following statement that we're bringing from a Tosefta. Abba Shal says, Aliyas based kachei kachim, Chamuri based kachei kachim. That actually the upper chamber of the Holy of Holies, the Kachei Kachim, had even greater Kedusha, had even greater sanctity on some level than the Kachei Kachim itself. This doesn't sound so good for Rav, who said that the Gagin and Aliyos did not, the rooftops and the upper chambers didn't receive a Kedusha. It sounds like they have even greater Kedusha. So Shebeis Kachei Kachim, Kohen Gadol Nikras Pamachas B'Shana, that the Kachei Kachim itself, the Kohen Gadol would only have the right to go inside one time a year. That was, of course, when he did the Avodah on Yom Kippurim. But Aliyos Beis Kachei Kachim, but the upper chamber of the Beis Kachei Kachim was utilized even less frequently. They would only go to make sure that if it needed any maintenance, they would check it out. But they would only check it out once every 7 years. Some say twice every 7 years, but still much more infrequent than the Kachei Kachim itself, which was gone into on an annual basis. There's even one opinion that says that the upper chambers would only be checked out for maintenance purposes once every 50 years, to see what the type of repairs and fixing up it might require. So it sounds like the upper chambers did have kedusha. So Rav Yossi said that's the upper chambers of the sanctuary area of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Kodesh HaKadoshim is a different story altogether because that's above the sanctuary. From the Heichal, from the sanctuary area, you're going to get up and you're going to, ask kashas. Shiny Heichal. The Heichal is totally different, except because there's a pasuk in Divrei Yamim that says that the upper chambers above the sanctuary, those did receive sanctity. It doesn't mean that the rooftops received sanctity, and it doesn't mean that the rooftops or upper chambers in Yerushalayim, for example, or above the Azara received any sanctity. Rav was saying a much more general statement. The Heichal is an exception to the rule because it's the pasuk that says, "V'yitin David l'Shlomo b'no," because David gave over the plans for the base of Mikdash to Shlomo, Eis Tavnis ha'olam, the plans for the antechamber before you would get into the Kodesh area within the Azara. The Es Batav and the accompanying chambers on the side, as a Ginzakav, and also the storage areas, Rali Osab in the upper chambers, V'chadarav, Apnimim, and the inner chambers, Ubeis HaKaporis, and the chamber of the Kaporis, which was the Ark cover, and all of this was given over that it had to be done according to very particular specifications. Uksiv, as it says in Daf Yomi as well, that everything was drawn up according to the divine plans that were handed over from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we see that there was a divine plan that there had to be a certain measure of Kedusha when it came to the upper chambers that were above the sanctuary area. That's an exception to the rule. Tashma. Okay, so what about the following? We have here a Mishnah that says, Halishkos benuyos b'kodesh psukos lachol tochen chol. That those chambers that were on the side of the Azara that opened up into the Kodesh, into the holy area, they were built in the holy area, but they opened up into the non-holy area. So then since their opening up was going sort of like outside of the Azara area into the Har HaBayis, so therefore they didn't have the sanctity of the Azara. But Gagoseyan, Kodesh, however, their rooftops did have the sanctity of the Azara. So it sounds like, okay, well, rooftops did then receive a sanctity. So Tirgama of Chisda, so Chisda said, no, that's in a case where the rooftop was on the same level as the Azara. These were lishkos that were directly underneath the Azara, and the rooftop was the Azara. It was a continuation. It was basically the floor of the Azara. Shikagoseyan shav in the Karka Azara. That the roofs were on the floor of the Azara, so therefore that's why they received the sanctity of the Azara, not because they were a gag, they were a roof of the Azara, they were the actual Azara. Yahaki, wait a second, if that's the case, so what about the Sefer? Ema Sefer, the Sefer there of the Mishnah, Ma'aser Sheni says, Benuyos b'chov sukkos l'kodesh, if they were built in the non-sanctified area, but they opened up into the Azara area, then Tochen Kodesh, and then the inside of the chamber did receive sanctity, but that their roof was in such a case when they were built basically in the hall area, outside of the Azara area. So then the rooftop on that case was considered to be non-sanctified. And if we say that we're talking about, because in the ratio of the Mishnah, we're talking about when the rooftop was, somebody's asking what we're up to. One Peivav and Aleph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, about 5 words before the end of the line. And if, however, you're going to say, like in the ratio, and a shavin, the karka that we're talking about when the roofs were on the same level of the karka, so the karka azara of the karka of the azara, havia the mechilos. So then the bottom level is considered to be sort of in the tunnel area. It's considered to be, below the surface. And any area which is below the surface certainly should not have any holiness. So therefore, how can you say that it was psuchos l'kodesh, that if this chamber was opened up into an area which was, say, on the same line as the Azara, it would receive kedusha when we're talking about an area which was in the tunnels below. Rabbi Yochanan said that the tunnel areas are below the actual surface, the basement areas, did not receive kedusha. So the Gemara answers no. That statement of Rabbi Yochanan that the mechilos did not receive kedusha, that's not an absolute statement. It depends. Yesh or yesh. When he said that the mechilos don't have kedusha, that's when the opening of the basement area was towards the Har HaBayis as opposed to the opening towards the Azara. When do we say that it has kedusha? When the opening was towards the Azara. This particular statement of the Tanaim is talking about when the chamber is opened up to the Azara. So in such a case, even the mechilos, even the basement area can receive kedusha. But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, sort of as an absolute principle, that the mechilos, the basement areas, the tunnel areas underneath the heichal are considered to be non-sanctified? Sounds like across the board, it doesn't matter whether it's opening up into the sanctified area of the Azara or the non-sanctified area of the Har HaBayis. So we say, no, it wasn't an absolute statement. Even that statement of Rabbi Yochanan was a qualified statement. It was only talking about when the chamber was opened up in the direction of the Har HaBayis, only then does it not receive kedusha. Tashma, wait a second, but we also have a a further statement. The further statement says Vigago Kodesh. This is a continuation of the statement of Rabbi Yehuda that we had quoted earlier. And this statement says explicitly that the Gag is considered to be Kodesh. It is considered to have a sanctity, and that seems to run against what Rabbit said. Rabbit said that the Gagin do not have any kedusha. So this says explicitly Vigago Kodesh. And now we said in the case of the Heichal, this is that there was a special rule, a special Xeris Akasuv, that the upper chambers of the Heichal had a kedusha because of that pasuk in Divrei Yomim. But as Rashi points out over here, that pasuk that deals with the upper chambers of the Heichal does not deal with the upper chamber, does not deal with the rooftops of the Heichal. This is so therefore we can't give the answer that we gave earlier that this is a special Xeris Akasuv. There's no special Xeris Akasuv over here. This is again a continuation of the previous statement by Hatanya. I think I said Rabbi Yochanan, should have been Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said Mechilos Mitachas Heichal Chol. So we explained, no, even when Rabbi Yehuda said that, that's only if the chambers opened up to a non-sanctified area. So then the continuation of that was Vigago Kodesh, but he seems to be saying that the rooftop of the Heichal is Kodesh. But we don't have a special Xeris Akasuv to say that it was Kodesh. And according to Rav, if there's no special Xeris Akasuv, the rooftop shouldn't be Kodesh. It shouldn't be sanctified. So we say, no, but that's also not an absolute statement. But Tizra, you think that's true? Bakatani, it also says, Gagin Olalu, that these rooftops, Ein Ochlin Sham Kachim, Vein Shoktim Sham Kachim Kalim. These rooftops, you're not allowed to eat there from the Kachim. If it was sanctified, so you should be able to eat from the Kachim, and you're not allowed to shech there the Kachim Kalim. If it was sanctified, you should be able to shech there the Kachim Kalim. Velakasha Gogo Kodesh. But we just got through saying that the rooftop of the Heichal is considered to be sanctified. So it means not really that it's sanctified. And this is consistent with what Rav said, that it's not really sanctified. It just means that it was used as an area where they stored objects that were utilized for the purpose of the construction of the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, it had a special high-level designation, but not actual spiritual sanctity. So Amrav Chama Bagoy on the Osen Beis Amos, that they kept their certain measuring rods. The Tanan Beis Amos Haya B'Shushan Abira. There were two measuring rods that were kept in certain chambers that were above the eastern area of the Azara. Achas Laker Mizrachis Itzifonis. One of them was kept in the northeast area, like near the northeast roof of the Azara. Achas Laker Mizrachis Dromis, and one of them was kept on the southeast area. Remember that the Beis HaMikdash goes from east to west. So as you're going into the Azara, that's on the east side, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim is all the way on the west side. So here, on the top of like the east side of the Azara, they had like these little chambers where they kept these special measuring rods that were like a little bit longer than your usual measuring rod of an amma. An amma is a 6 tefachim, which is 24 etzbos. And these were measuring rods that had an amma, which was like either 24 and a half etzbos or 25 etzbos, as the case may be. And why was this called Shushan Abira area? It was called the Shushan Abira area because it was kind of like this special chamber that was built on the eastern, gate as you go into the Azara, and it had like pictures of Shushan Abira, appropriate as we're approaching Purim, in order to give like special recognition to the Persian kingdom that allowed for the building of the second Beis HaMikdash in the first place. So Achaz al Keren Mizrachis Achaz al Keren Mizrachis Dromis, Zusha al Keren Mizrachis Sephonis, I say Yiseo Hashem Moshe Chatzi Etzba. What was kept in the chamber on the northeastern side was a measuring rod that was 24 and a half etzbos. It was like it measured an amma as a little bit longer than that of Moshe Rabbeinu, which was 6 tefachim and 24 etzbos. Zusha al Keren Mizrachis Dromis, I say Yiseo Aleh Chatzi Etzba. And then the one on the southeast corner had stored within it measuring rods that were even a half etzba longer than that, which was a total of 25 etzbos. So it says Yisrael Shemoshe etzba. So the one in the southeast corner was a full etzba longer than the amma that was measured by Moshe Rabbeinu. It was 25 etzbos as opposed to 24 etzbos. Why is it that you had these measuring rods that were a little bit longer than your standard amma? That was because when they would retain craftsmen to build in the Beis HaMikdash, so they would give them a certain amount of money. They would pay them a certain amount of money to build a certain amount of amos, whatever it was that they were building. They had to build a certain height of whatever it was that they were constructing. And if they wouldn't build up to the precise measurements, then they would be taking money for less than, for more than what they performed. If they would take, for example, money to build 4 amos, and they would only build like 3 9/10 amos, so then they would be guilty of me'ilah because they didn't quite earn the money that they were paid. So therefore, when they would build in the amos, they would build with amos that were a little bit longer, so that it would end up that even if they would be off by a little bit, even if they would, even if they would not reach the height that they were supposed to reach, it would still end up being, around the amount that they were supposed to build because they built in accordance with a higher and longer measure. They would receive money to build according to the lower measurement, but then they would be obligated to build according to the longer measurement in order to avoid me'ilah. So that they would, even if they undershot a little bit their goal, they would still build the appropriate amount. But why did you have to have 2 larger measuring rods for the amos? Why not just one? There was either a half an espa longer or an espa longer. So one was if they had to build something that was either silver or gold, and they had to make up the shortfall themselves in terms of building according to the larger measurement would come out of their pockets. So we wouldn't want the workers to have to overexpend a tremendous amount of money just to avoid me'ilah, and it would come out that even if they were building a little bit more, if it was silver and gold, it would obviously cost them a lot more. So then we would just overshoot the target by only half an espa. But if they were building like just a regular construction, like stones, for example, it's not so expensive to go and obtain some extra stones out of their own pocket. So then they would build according to the larger measuring rod of an additional etzba. So now we have a Mishnah that says that the Mishnah had said that the window areas that were on the side of the Azara were basically treated with the same kedusha as the Azara, and so too the thickness of the wall. So bishlam achalonos. So now what did we say? We said that the Gagan, if we're talking about like an upper chamber or rooftop area, so according to Rav, it doesn't have Kedusha. So why is it that these things have Kedusha? So the only way that we could justify them having Kedusha was if it was the same level as the Azara. Okay, fine. The windows could be the same level as the Azara. The Azara also went up at various points, like 11 amos into the Azara. The first 11 amos from east to west was the area where the Kohanim, where all of the people, not only the Kohanim, could hang out. And then when you went past the 11 amos, there was like an incline where you went up some steps, and then the Azara surface became higher, and that was the area where really only the Kohanim, as a general rule, were supposed to enter. So you can understand that it's possible that there were windows that were built and that were parallel to the upper platform that started out 11 amos into the Azara, and that would be on the same level as the continuation of the Azara. That we get. So Bishlam Achalonis Mishchachos La Deshavi L'Karka Azara. We understand that the windows could have been parallel on the same level as the Karka Azara, as the Azara was getting higher and higher as it went along. But the Uvei Achoma sounds like the thickness of the walls. I mean, the walls of the Azara weren't ginormous. They weren't really, really high. And here we're saying that the thickness of the walls up until the very top had the Kedusha of the Azara. Isn't that akin to saying that the upper chambers also had Kedusha? And wouldn't that go against the statement of Rav? So we say, no, there was like a little wall. There was a large wall, and there was like a rampart. There was a smaller wall that was there as a kind of it was there in order to secure the higher wall, that it was like a holding wall. It says in Echa that all the walls of the Beis Hamikdash mourned as the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Chaya v'Chama, the ramparts and the walls. So we see that there was like smaller walls and larger walls. There was a smaller wall and a larger wall. That the high wall, mourned, and the low wall mourned. So when we say that the thickness of the walls have the kedusha, that's talking about the small walls, talking about like the holding wall, the rampart that was there to secure the higher wall, but didn't go up nearly as high. It would be, go up to probably just the level of the upper platform of the Azara into the 11 Amos mark and so forth, so we can understand, according to Rav, why they would have kedusha. Now we're up to the next Mishnah, Naya Mishnah. If I have two chaburos, so they're eating their korban pesach and they're in the same house. So if they're two different chaburos, so then they're not supposed to merge the two chaburas together. So one chabura turns to one side, and they turn their faces to one side and they eat. And the other one turns their faces to the other side of the house and they eat. And this way, we keep the chaburos separate. And we're going to have a discussion as to why it is that they needed to eat in this particular fashion in the Gemara. And they had a kettle, that heated up the hot water. That would be in the middle, so that both chaburas would be able to avail themselves of the hot water. When the shamish, the attendant, would dilute, the water, would pour the hot water for the various groups. Kofetz is piv, so he didn't want to be in no man's land because the kettle was basically in between the one chabur, in between the one group and the other group, so it was essentially in no man's land. So therefore, he would just seal his mouth in order not to create his own independent chabura. He presumably belonged only to one of those chaburas. Kofetz is piv maxir panav, and he would turn his head away. Achimagia etzel chaburaso, until he would return to his own chabura, the okal, and he would eat over there, because if he would mistakenly end up eating in the area of the mecham, so then that would become his area. He wouldn't be allowed to move from there. And also, the reason why he had to close his mouth, that we could say, just he shouldn't drink. He shouldn't drink and eat in that area. So this was to avoid chashad. And nobody should suspect him, says Rashi, that he was eating or next to the kettle. So therefore, he would make a grand display of closing his mouth very, very tightly and turning his head, so everybody would understand that he's not eating in two different locations, because our Tana holds that you can't eat in two different locations. You can only eat next to one kabura, not next to the other kabura. If you have a kala, a new bride who was just married, presumably in the last 30 days or so she's a new bride, so she would turn her head when she would eat, but she's not turning her head because she belongs to multiple chaburos, and she's eating with the wrong chabur and has to turn towards the other chabur. No, she's turning her head out of modesty, because the kala, she's all dressed up and everybody might be gazing at her, and it's immodest to gaze at a kala. So when she would eat, she would kind of veer off into a different direction, so nobody would be able to stare at her while she eats. Gemara says, who is our Mishnah going like? Our Mishnah seems to stand for the proposition that when you eat the korban pesach, you have to stick to your chabura, and it can't look like you're joining a different chabura. That's why the chaburas have to face in different directions. That's why the shamish has to be very careful to make it look like he's not eating in a different location. So who's that going like? That's actually subject to a machlokas tanaim. Our Mishnah is going like Rabbi Yehuda. Masisa money Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, because there's a brayso that says Al batim asher yachlu osam bahem. That it says the korban pesach is supposed to be eaten in houses, but it says you eat it, yochlu you, that they eat oto, the korban pesach, in the houses. So what does that connote? What is that pasuk? The wording of the pasuk connote? Malamis that teaches us, according to this Tana, shapesach necha b'shtei chaburas. The pesach itself, the korban pesach, can be split up amongst two different chaburas. I have one korban pesach. I can give half of the korban pesach to this chabura on one side, and the other half of the korban pesach I can give to the other chabura on the other side. No problem. But I might think that the person who is eating from the korban pesach, whether it's a person from the chabur on this side or a person from the chabur on the other side, I might think that person can go back and forth and eat the korban pesach in two different locations in two different chaburas. Nothing doing. Tamalomar. So that's why I have a different pasuk, also in Parshas Bo, that says "Babayas echad ye achel," that it has to be eaten in the person who eats it. Yeyachel in one location. Mikan amu hashamish. Based on this, that's why we have the principle as well that the shamish, the attendant, the waiter, shachal kazayis b'tzad hatanur. If he ended up eating kazayis of the korban pesach next to, let's say, the oven, the kitchen area. So now he's stuck. He's not allowed to eat in a different location. So what does he do? So he be careful. So if he's smart, he'll just make sure he has a lot of food in that location. He'll just, eat his entire meal over there. Mali kreisa mimenu. He'll just, eat more than a kazayas. He'll eat 10 kazasim. And his members of the chabura who haven't started eating feel bad for him, so they'll just move their location over to where he is in the kitchen, and they'll just all eat in the kitchen. In this way, he doesn't have to worry that he's missing out on the meal, because they'll all eat in that. They'll make that the location of the chabura. They'll sit next to him. That's how Rabbi Yehuda interprets the verse. He interprets the verse, meaning that the person himself, not the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach could be eaten in two different locations, but the person himself has to eat in one location. One person can eat next to two different chaburas in two different locations. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah seems to be going like Rabbi Yehuda, but there is another opinion. The other opinion is Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it goes like this. That the pasuk that says that you eat in multiple houses, that's to teach me that one person can eat in several different houses. One person can eat in different chaburas. Next page, I might think that one person I might think that the Korban Pesach itself can be eaten in two different chaburas. No, the Korban Pesach itself, that the Korban Pesach itself has to be in one chabura. It's served in one chabura. That's the place where the Korban Pesach is served. I can't have it served amongst two different chaburas, but one person can start eating from one location and he can finish in a different location. So, what is it that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon are arguing about? Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't look at B'vayis Echad Ye'achel the way it's read. I look at the actual letters. The actual letters spell out Yochal. But in Yochal, one person, has to eat in one location. He's not allowed to eat in separate locations. Rabbi Shimon said, no, I look at the way that the pasuk is read. It's read b'bayis echad ye'achel. Ye'achel means that the korban Pesach itself has to be eaten in one location. But the people who are there, they can move around from place to place. Rabbi Shimon Sava Yesh Aim Lamikra. Okay, so how does this? So therefore, it's the one person can eat in multiple locations, but the Korban Pesach itself is not split amongst different chaburas. So Hayu Yoshvin. So what happens in the following scenarios? Let's say that they're sitting. V'nifasa mechitza beinehem. And now what happens? So there is a mechitza. I have one group that's eating the Korban Pesach, and now all of a sudden there is a partition which is plopped in between half of them and the other half of them. So So according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that a Pesach can be eaten by different chaburas, no problem. Oh, then they can continue to eat. Okay, so now we've created two different chaburas, doesn't bother us. The Divrei Omer, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says, ain't a Pesach necha b'shtei chaburas, that the Pesach itself has to be eaten in one location. I just created a second location because I created a partition between one group and the other group. So ain't open, they can't eat anymore. And similarly, if I have the opposite case, I would have a machlokes as well. I have one group that's eating together, and now there was they were eating, and there was a partition. There was a partition between them, so they went two different groups, and now the partition was taken away. The partition was taken away. So the Divrei Omer okay b'shnei mekomos. So according to the opinion of that says that the person who's eating is allowed to eat in multiple locations, namely the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So Ochlin, no problem. That now it's considered as if they've moved the people who had a partition. Now they don't have a partition anymore. So it's as if they've expanded, they've moved their location of eating to a larger hall, because now there are more people eating, in that area because the mechitza was taken away. No problem. They're allowed to go to a different location. The Divrei Omer, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that the ochel, the person who's eating, is not allowed to eat in two different makomos. And now it's as if a new makom has been created. Can't eat anymore. So Yosef Kahana Kapashle Mifsha. So if Kahana gave these two nafkamina, says obvious nafkamina. So Amalei Rav Ashi, the Rav Kahana. So Rav Ashi said to Rav Kahana, it's not like necessarily so obvious, because if I'm sitting in a location and there was no partition, and now suddenly there's a partition, so I say where there was a partition, and now suddenly the partition is taken away. So it's as if I've moved to a different location. It's not necessarily the case. It's as if I moved to another location. Or similarly, if I was sitting with one group and now there's a partition which is placed in the middle. So does that mean that because there's a partition placed in the middle and I didn't move, so it says as if now the Pesach has divided into two different chaburas. It's to say everyone's sitting in the same location. So he says to me, it's a question mark. It's not obvious that these are nafkaminas. Does it really create two different mikomos if I plop down a partition? Does it really create two different chaburos if I take away the partition? Is that really true? Olo teku. So he says, I leave that as unresolved as to whether this would really be a nafkamina between the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. What do we say about the kala? The kala turns her head when she eats. My time, and why does she turn her head when she eats? Because she's embarrassed. She's embarrassed that everyone's staring at her. So it's considered modest that she should turn her away. So Rafuna came to the house of Nachman. So Amalei Mashimcha. They said, "What's your name?" So Amalu, my name is Rav Huna. He said, "I'm Rabbi Huna." So Amun said, "Mara Purios." They said, "Oh, okay, we'll let you sit on the bed." That was considered to be very exalted and distinguished to sit on the bed. Yosef, so he did. So Yosef, he sat. Yavale Kasa. So they gave him a cup of wine to drink. Kali Bechaz Zimna Mashasya betray Zimni. He accepted it right away. Didn't give them a hard time. He didn't refuse it all, and he drank it in 2 sips. And he didn't turn his head. So Amulei, my time at Kars Lach Rav Huna. So they said to him, "Why is it that you refer to yourself as Rav Huna? It seems a little bit immodest. Usually, person asks your name. You don't say, I'm Rabbi so-and-so. It sounds like he's tooting his own horn a little bit. So Amalu, Baal Shemani. So he said, different interpretations here. One interpretation is that for when I was a little kid, that's what they called me. It was not based on smicha. That's my nickname. Everyone called me Rav Huna. My son Yishai, he goes to school. They call him Rabbi Reese. So he said that's my name. I'm called Rav Huna. Another interpretation is, why should I call myself Rav Huna? I earned it. I went to smicha. I passed all the tests. I earned it. I have a right to call myself Rav Huna. Okay. So my time amulach nesev apoyasaf. Why is it that most people, they kind of like sit on the floor and stuff, and they don't take such an exalted place to sit on the bed, and you didn't refuse at all, you didn't decline, you immediately took us up on our offer. So Amalu Kamashi Baal Bayis to say, said, whatever Baal Bayis tells you to do, I'm a guest. You have to follow whatever the host says. There's in parentheses over here. So question as to whether this is appropriate, whether this is really part of the girsa, chutz mitzeh. That's the Baal Bayis says to leave. You don't have to listen to the Baal Bayis if he says to leave. The meaning says it's a joke. This was added by somebody as a joke. If the Baal Bayis says to leave, you got to leave. But somebody said, of course we'd say, Baal Bayis says that you have to leave, you don't have to leave. So Magen Avraham says, no, this has halakhic import. It means as follows. That the Baal Bayis sends it to ask you to get some napkins from the kitchen. So you listen to the Baal Bayis and get some napkins. The Baal Bayis says, sit on a bed. So you sit on the bed. But the Baal Bayis says, go to Jewel or Mariano's or Hungarian and get me, the following order of groceries that I need. So you don't have to go outside. You don't have to go shopping, for the Baal Bayis. If it's inside the house, so you listen to Baal Bayis. Baal Bayis sends you outside the house, you don't have to listen to the Baal Bayis. Anyway, so he said, whatever the Baal Bayis tells me to do, I have to do. This was to sit on a bed was like a very, very big honor. That's what the Tosfos says over here in the Tipo Maslei Masavin. It's a really, really big honor. So therefore, this is something which, you would decline. Even if the person who was asking you to do it was a very distinguished personality, you would decline. So the only justification Rav Huna had to immediately accept the offer to sit on the bed was this principle that you always have to listen to the host. My time, why is it that you accepted the wine right away? That you accepted the honor of the wine right away? So this is a little bit less of an honor when it comes to something which is less of an honor. So there's generally a protocol that you decline it. Somebody asks you to dop into the Alma. You decline once, then you half decline a second time. You only agree a third time around. So Amalu, so he says, no, that's because you only decline if the person's not distinguished. But you, Rav Nachman, you're pretty distinguished. Misarvin the Kazim and Misarvin the Gadol. You don't decline, that's the justification many people have when they're asked to daven for the Yom. Wait, the Gabbai asked me. The Gabbai is a very chashuv person. I can't refuse the Gabbai. I'm not supposed, I can't go through this protocol of declining this. He's an Adam Gadol. So Ein Misarvin L'Gadol. The Meshech Chochmah asked, so why did Moshe Rabbeinu give a Kadosh Baruch Hu such a hard time when he chose him to be the leader of Klal? So he said, no, because that's not just, some sort of a small cover. That's a very exalted cover. That's like sitting on the bed. That's a very exalted cover. Exalted cover, you're allowed to refuse. The only reason Rav Huna didn't refuse the exalted kavod was because he had to listen to the Baal Habayis. So my time, Ishtasi betrays Zimni. Why did you drink it? Did you sip the wine in two sips? So I'm a little Tanya because it's a price that this is considered to be proper etiquette. Emily Post. Hashosa Kosa Basakas raised the Gagrin. And if you guzzle down all the wine in one shot, then you're considered to be gluttonous. Shnaim derech eretz. 2 sips, that's considered to be proper derech eretz. That's proper manners. Shloshim Gasei Ruach. You really take your time, 3 sips, that's already considered to be haughty. So my time in law adras apach. Why didn't you turn your face away? Why don't you just like drink in front of everybody? So Amalu, what do you mean? The only one who turns their face away is the kala. A kala has to have an extra level of sneer. So kala feches paneh. Now our Mishnah says a kala turns the face away. Other people aren't supposed to turn their face away. Tonight the Mishnah says about Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, what did he do? This is a Yerushalmi. Ikla lebei Rabbi Shimon. He came to the house of Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi ben Lakunya, Yavulei Kasa. So they gave him a cup of wine to drink. He immediately accepted it. He drank it in one gulp. None of this 2-sip stuff, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi. No, siree. So Amilei, they asked him, what do you mean? Don't you know that the etiquette, that if you drink the kos in one gulp, you consider gluttonous? So I'm a little, that's not for me. Because you gave me a tiny little cup. You gave me a 1 ounce cup, but I'm not supposed to drink that in one go. And also, it was very sweet wine. Sweet wine is not subject to this rule. You can drink sweet wine in one go. And also, I'm a big guy. He had a really large stomach. For someone who's like a really large stomach, it's okay. You can have it in one go. So I'm question as to whether this is like general etiquette rule, a continuation of the previous sugya as Rashi learns, whether it's a reference to Korban Pesach, which is the way Tosfos learns, and I think the way we paskin. So, but a chabura, if you have a chabura eating the Korban Pesach, so for the waiter to feel obligated that he has to serve them already, so that's only if you have a group of 3 that have already arrived. But once you had 3 that arrived, so then he has to serve anybody who's a straggler who stays behind. So even if there's only one person who stays behind at the end, he has to continue to serve that person. So I'm a rabbi who to regile the male. So he says that that's assuming that they all sort of arrive at the same general time, that he doesn't have to like wait around for too long. Rashi says it's referring to the obligation to serve the last guy. That the last guy he has to serve the last guy only if he doesn't stay like too long. He doesn't wear out his welcome. And similarly, when they arrive, they should not all, rush to arrive very early in order for the shamish to have to serve them for too long a time, if they know that they're going to tarry for a long time. And also, that's only if they tell the daila, they tell the waiter ahead of time that they're not all going to leave at once, and that one person is going to remain for a while, so the shamish can plan his evening accordingly. They can't pounce that upon him. I'm Ravina Menosi. So, rules of Korban Pesach, what's the rules of etiquette? I'm Ravina Menosi. Schar Domim. Who pays the bill? Who pays the waiter? They have to pay the waiter. And the one who stays the last, so he's the one who gets stuck with the bill. He's the one who has to pay the full amount to the waiter. That's not the halacha. Everybody has to join in the paying of the waiter, and not just the last guy who happened to be abandoned by the others when they ran out. So you can't get out of paying the bill so easily. And the Hadron Allah, Kate said, Solin, it's Hashem. Tomorrow you'll be back to your regular Rebbe. You'll start Perek Ha'isha. Everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. A lot of enthusiasm here. I'm not feeling it. Randy, you should be dancing.
All right, just listening to you.
All right, have a good one, everyone.